Okay, I'm gonna make a video of the lab for the Counting Atoms lab for Honors Chem. And I'm gonna do it on camera and you can record the data along with me in your lab report and then do the calculations on your own. All right, I'm gonna start. So hold on. So I'll turn the camera on. I'll explain what everything is. All right, so here we have the setup and all the equipment for the lab, and I'll zoom in so that you can see the readings on the scales and things like that. So we have copper sulfate, which is the salt that we're going to make our solution with. We have iron powder, which looks like dirt sort of, but it's definitely iron. We have a mortar and pestle, which we're going to use to grind up our copper sulfate to make our solution so that it dissolves a little bit easier and quicker. The beakers that we're going to need, we're going to heat it up on the hot plate, which is here, and this is to record the temperature, and some scoops and stuff in our scale. So the first thing we're going to do is make the copper sulfate solution. We're going to weigh out the copper sulfate, but the reason to weigh it is to make sure that we have extra copper sulfate. So we want to make sure that all of the iron gets used up in our reaction. So I'm going to record the weight of this, the mass. Zero that. Move the camera so you can see. And I need at least 5 grams. Doesn't have to be exactly 5, but these crystals are pretty big. All right, 5.74. I'm going to take one off. Let's see, 5.03, that's perfect. So that's the mass of copper sulfate. And I'm going to take this and grind it with my mortar and pestle. Awesome. This will take a minute. Doesn't have to be really powdery, but the solution will form quicker. So we'll be able to dissolve it much faster if it's ground up. Turn the hot plate to get it ready. This isn't working. There we go. Start with the hot plate warmed up. And then you can see what this looks like. Finish. Couple more big pieces there. Good enough. Okay. So we're going to use the small beaker to make our solution and to do our reaction. And then this is going to be, that beaker is going to be for waste. So scrape this into the beaker. It's already been weighed. Because we have excess copper sulfate, I'm not really worried about getting every single drop. Try to get most of it. All right, and then to this, I'm going to add 40 milliliters of distilled water. It says to use a graduated cylinder, but I don't actually have to do that because I'm just going to measure the volume of water on my beaker here. The amount of water isn't really crucial because we're just going to get rid of it later. All right, and we've learned from our solubility rules that copper sulfate is soluble in water, and it is, but it's not as soluble as we would like it to be. It takes a lot longer to make a solution than we want to wait in lab. So to hurry things along and to make the reaction go quicker, I'm going to heat this up on the hot plate, not to boiling, just to about 50 degrees, which is why I have the thermometer. So I'm going to put this on here. I turned it on a little bit ago, so it's already warm. And while this is heating, it will, and making, the copper sulfate will be dissolving and it will make a clear solution. And while that's happening, I'm going to weigh out the iron powder. So I'll leave that here, let that heat up and dissolve. I don't want it to boil. I don't want the temperature to get close to boiling. So I'm just going to keep an eye on the temperature here. With the thermometer, so I can watch out if it gets too hot. All right, so while that's warming up and dissolving, we're done with this one. We're gonna make a solution. We're gonna weigh out the iron powder. So zero my paper, and the mass of iron will be one of the data points that you will use in your lab to do your calculations. And what it says is that you need around a gram. It doesn't have to be exactly a gram, but we have to record exactly how much we have. So let's see. 1.07. I'm going to go with that. So that's the mass of iron powder, 1.07 grams. I'm just going to leave that there for now. We'll use that in a minute. And the copper sulfate solution, it's above 50, so it's as warm as it needs to be. I'm just going to stir it a little bit more to continue to get it to dissolve. I don't want to heat it all the way to boiling. I just want to get it warm enough for all the blue salt, the copper salt, to dissolve inside the solution. It's almost there. It's getting there. Okay, if it's a tiny bit cloudy because the reaction will actually make the rest of it dissolve, but things react better in solution. There you go. That's good. All right, and while this is hot, I'm gonna take it off the hot plate. I'm gonna shut off the hot plate. So, done with that. I'm gonna take this off the hot plate. It's not that hot. And I'm gonna do the reaction while it's warm, while it's hot, because it'll react faster that way. I'm done with the iron powder. And then I'm gonna add the iron powder that I weighed out to my copper sulfate solution, and then I'm gonna stir it. Just use this as kind of a scoop. So now I'll put the camera on it close up so you can see what's happening. So as part of your lab report, you want to make observations. Because we added extra copper sulfate, the blue color is not going to go away entirely. It's not going to get all used up. However, the iron powder is reacting, and it's hard to tell maybe now, but the iron powder is reacting and the iron's going into solution and it's forming copper metal, and that's the reddish brown solid. Let me see if this will focus. That's the reddish brown solid, which is forming in my beaker. I'm going to give it about 10 minutes or so. to make sure that it's all dissolved, sorry, to make sure that everything has reacted. I don't want any iron left. I want only copper salt, or sorry, copper solid. I don't know if you can see this. It's hard to tell. Move the camera up a little bit. I'm gonna turn the camera up so you can see on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that the light's shining on it. Yeah, there it goes. So the new solid is reddish. The old one was brown and the new one is red. And it's hard for it to focus when I'm holding it. So then the next part of the procedure, essentially what we're going to do is we want to get the copper all by itself. We want to get rid of all the extra solution. And then we want to clean the copper so that the only thing there is just the pure copper. At that point, the copper will still be wet because it'll have water around, and then we'll dry it in the oven. And then after everything is dry, I just realized I forgot to measure the mass of the clean dry beaker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the reaction. We're going to weigh it, and then I'm going to clean the beaker, and we're actually going to get the mass of the beaker when we're all done. So don't forget to record that at the end of the reaction. Okay, so I think we're done. There's no more brown iron solid. All the solid is reddish, which means it's copper. And like I said, the solution is still blue because we have leftover solution, and that's on purpose. But it looks good. Yeah, everything looks great. It happens pretty fast because we did it when it was warm. So it actually makes the reaction go pretty quickly. So in the next step, we are going to get rid of the solution. And we're going to do what's called decanting. And we did this earlier in the year when we did this separation of a mixture lab. Whenever we pour something off, you never want to pour it directly into the sink. We are going to pour it down the sink, but we always want to pour it first into a beaker or something that to collect it. And part of that is because if we make a mistake, if you pour something into the sink and you realize you made a mistake, you can't get it back. So I'm going to do this. When you decant, I'm going to stir this so that it's mixed really well. And then I'm going to give it a minute, and I'm going to let the copper settle at the bottom, give it like 30 seconds or so. And copper's pretty heavy, so it's going to settle at the bottom, and then I'm going to pour off the solution. Pouring it like this helps it not drip down the side of the beaker. So you can see as I decant, because copper is pretty heavy, it settles quite well, and it's pretty easy to pour off just the liquid and leave the solid behind. However, it is definitely possible for me to get a little bit of the copper, to pour off a little bit of the copper. That would definitely be a source of experimental error. And there's probably some copper particles that I can't even see. So it's definitely a possibility. So now I've left a little bit of the solution behind because I'm going to wash it now, and I'm going to add more water. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I just did. So now we have copper metal, which actually looks pretty good already. I want to make sure that all the solution is gone. So I'm going to wash it with distilled water. I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to add about 10 milliliters. Just a little bit at a time. And now stir it again. And notice it doesn't really look blue anymore, which tells me that most of the solution should be good and gone. And now I'm going to let it settle again. Okay. So again, the copper will settle to the bottom of the beaker. Move this so you can see it pretty well. And then I'm going to again pour my water off, and I'm going to do that washing a total of 3 times. So this is the first time. Okay, so do it again. And every time it looks a little bit more copper colored, which is exactly what we want. All right, let it settle for a minute. And then pour off the liquid. So this is the second time. Make sure that the copper is settled. You see, I see a little tiny bits of copper getting poured off with the water. That would definitely be a source of experimental error. All right, now I'm going to do that one more time. See the colors really well. Just to make sure the copper is as clean as I can get it. Now it has that nice copper, like looks like pennies. It settles pretty well. You can see that. So the copper settles at the bottom every time. Here, move the camera a little bit. All right, so now I have nice clean copper, powder, metal. Looks exactly the way it's supposed to, see? And if I recorded the mass right now, it would be way, way too big. The mass would be way too high because it's filled with water, it's very wet. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put it in the oven and then I'm going to shut off the video, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of the recording the mass of the beaker after the copper is all dried, and I'll add that to the file for the assignment, so you'll be able to have that piece of data. I will also then clean out the beaker and record the mass of the empty dry beaker. Actually, I will just turn the machine back on. I'm gonna put this in the oven. I'm gonna turn the camera up so you can see our oven, which is across the room. And you can see me. All right. So our oven's over here. Turn the oven on. Put it in the oven to dry. All right, so I put it in the oven, and I'm just going to pause the recording, and it has to be in the oven for about 30 minutes. And then after that, I will just turn it back on, and we will record the rest of the data that we need. Okay, so I'm back. I'll turn the camera on. And here we are. I took the copper out of the oven. It was sat in there about 30 minutes or so to dry. I don't know if you can see this. I'm gonna do this so you can see it from the top. It's like hard to see that the light is kind of shiny. It's like powder now. It's very, very dry. All the water is gone, which is what we wanted. And now I'm gonna record the mass of the beaker with the dry copper. So I'm going to zero the scale. All right, and that is, let's see, get a little closer, 51.23 grams. That's going to go in your data table. And then you might have realized it, I forgot to record the mass of the empty beaker. So I'm going to pause again. I'm going to go clean and dry the beaker really well, and then come back and record it. So, so that you'll have all the data that you need to do the lab. All right, so I'm back. I cleaned and dried the beaker again because I forgot to record the mass at the beginning of the lab. So it's all dried out and it's all cleaned. I cleaned the copper out, and I couldn't use a different beaker because they don't all have the same mass. So it had to be this beaker. So then the mass of the beaker alone and empty is 50.05 grams. And I think that is the first thing, the first or second thing in your data table. All right, so there you have it. You have all the data in the video, and the questions are in the lab report. And if you have any questions, then let me know.